My son sacrificed his life to save me.
You have two choices. You can be the destroyer of this world, or you can be its savior. That's up to you.
Black Adam is the 12th film in the DC Extended Universe and is directed by Jaime Collet-Serra, who previously worked with The Rock in last year's Jungle Cruise movie. Wait, that was last year? Feels so long ago! And Black Adam follows the imprisoned 10th Adam, a man from ancient Kahndaq bestowed with the powers of the gods, who used his powers for vengeance. After being freed nearly 5,000 years later, his unique form of justice born out of rage is challenged by the Justice Society, who are sent on a mission to contain him and his powers. DC has been making a bit of a comeback with their films recently, with The Batman being one of the best films I've seen this year, Zack Snyder finally getting to share his original vision of Justice League, and James Gunn's Suicide Squad quickly becoming an all-time favorite of mine. It's starting to become clear that even though they had a rocky start, Warner Bros. Is trying to show some improvement on their DC projects, keywords being trying and some. And for a while now, I thought that we might be in a new age of DC films, where we were past the days of Justice League, and based on the cool-looking trailers, the promised introduction of the Justice Society, and The Rock's never-ending promotion and hype for the film, I thought Black Adam was going to be further proof DC is redeeming themselves. Well, that's not what happened here. Black Adam has got to be one of the weaker films in the DC Extended Universe. I think the biggest issue with this film is that the story is just non-existent. As you've probably seen with the press for this film, Black Adam has been teased to be a major character in the DC Extended Universe's future, and will play a big part later on in the franchise with a possible fight between him and Henry Cavill's Superman. And this film will not let you forget that. The majority of this movie is dedicated to showing off Black Adam's godly powers and demonstrating the massive change in the hierarchy he presents to the franchise and how that will factor into later movies. However, the film is so focused on setting up future DCEU projects that it forgets the main reason why superhero movies have worked in the past, which is being an entertaining standalone film. The entire film is so convinced it has to set up new characters like Black Adam, Hawkman, and Dr. Fate for future movies or streaming shows, and creates so many conflicts that can't be resolved in a single film that it completely forgets to tell an interesting story that allows it to stand on its own as a fun movie with great characters you can actively want to see more of. The movie never once feels like it's interested in telling a great story, and because it's so great, people want more. It just wants to be a movie that sets up another movie that sets up another. And honestly, when the films it's setting up look more interesting than the one I'm actually watching, the one whose job it is to get me attached to these characters and excited for more content, that's probably not a good sign. And it's not like a movie can't set up future projects without needing to tell a story. The Batman and the Suicide Squad both had great stories, and did a terrific job of getting the audience attached to their characters. They're films you want to see more of because they've set up so many possibilities to expand the interesting worlds they've created, and the movies stood perfectly on their own without needing a connection to future or pre-existing projects. Black Adam also has a strange problem with its action. Because of the film's minimal focus on the story, most of the movie is a ton of non-stop action sequences where most of this film's runtime is taken up by Black Adam or the Justice Society fighting each other through battles sprinkled with unfunny quips or destroying everything in sight, whether it has any relevance to what's happening in the film or not. There's also a sense of extremely fast pacing throughout the film, where the movie is constantly trying to jump to the next big action scene to the next big action scene, and causes the entire experience of watching this to feel very overwhelming, as it rarely gives its viewers any time to breathe or take in what they just saw, and it also causes most of the important scenes for the narrative to feel rushed. Rarely do we ever get to have a fully fleshed out scene focused on the characters, and why we should care about them in the movie, because of the film's need to get to another big CGI-filled action scene, and results in most of them being underdeveloped and non-impactful, despite the movie eagerly wanting to set them up for future projects. It's pretty much the same issue as introducing most of the Justice League members in one short film all over again. It's only in the third act of the film where the movie finally decides to slow down a little and start to give us some backstory and reason to care for Black Adam and the Justice Society. One thing I'll give the film is that I wasn't afraid to get really brutal with its action scenes. There are a few stories online about how the first 4 cuts of this film received an R rating from the MPAA, and it's not hard to see why with this film's constant death, destruction, and gruesome kill scenes that give the action a good amount of tension. However, there's some very strange editing during the action sequences. There's a ton of rapid cuts and slow motion throughout these scenes, and takes away from the scope and brutality of the action they're trying to present in the film. Most of the action in general are giant CGI fights until the climax, where the film decides to bring back the giant skybeam trend from superhero films of the early 2010s. And this might have been passable if the visuals in this movie didn't look that bad, but most of the CG in this looks noticeable and cheap looking most of the time. And since the movie wants to portray how powerful Black Adam and the Justice Society are, there's rarely a sense of danger or threat for any character that wasn't a background character working for the villain, who's extremely bland and forgettable. But even though the characters don't get the focus or development they need for them to be set up as impactful characters in the franchise, the cast of this film does a decent job with the material they've been given. Dwayne Johnson does a solid job as Black Adam. For once, it feels like he's playing a real character and not himself in the jungle like he does again and again and again and again. And you could tell from his performance and promotion for this film that he's extremely passionate about playing this character. And even though his introduction film wasn't that great, I would be happy to see him in future DC films. Pierce Brosnan was perfect casting as Dr. Fate. He's awesome in the part and does the character a good amount of justice, easily making him one of the biggest standouts of the film. Aldous Hodge was pretty good as Hawkman. While a lot of his attachment for his character relies on how much the audience knows him from the comics, he does the most with what he's been given and has a couple of fun rivalry moments with Black Adam. Sarah Shahi did a fine job as Adriana Thomas, even if her character isn't anything that special. Quintessa Swindell was surprisingly very charming as Cyclone whenever she's on screen, and has great chemistry with Atomsmasher whenever they share a scene together. Speaking of which, I was extremely baffled when they announced Mr. Netflix teen rom-com Noah Centineo was cast as Atomsmasher. I legit thought it was an out-of-season April Fool's joke when that news came out. But he does a decent job at playing the character, even if one or two of his jokes made him come off as pretty annoying at times. While Black Adam promises the hierarchy of power in the DC Extended Universe is going to change, it doesn't guarantee the quality of their movies will. Black Adam has its moments every now and then, but as an entertaining standalone movie, it's a disappointing and forgettable experience that primarily wants to set up future DC projects and focus on non-stop action scenes with weak visuals and fast pacing rather than character moments and story, resulting in a pretty generic superhero film. The biggest compliment I could really give this film is that it's at least watchable and never boring, despite most of this movie's over-reliance on setup for upcoming films. I think I would mostly recommend this film for die-hard fans of DC Comics and lore, since they'll already be familiar with the characters and story, and the film does seem to have those fans as the target audience in mind. There's nothing aggressively awful about the film itself, but it's nothing special in the grand scheme of comic book films, and you might be better off just waiting for it to come to HBO Max. I'm going to give Black Adam a 5 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on Black Adam. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the film in the comments below. I'm still accepting submissions for my upcoming 100 subscriber special. If there's a 2022 film I missed that you'd like to see me review, leave your idea in the comments or in the reply section of my recommendation list on Letterboxd, which I'll link in the description. Anyways, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this review and you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and ring that notification bell to be notified for any upcoming reviews.
Did he just catch a rocket?